During my wedding ceremony, my cruel mother-in-law shamed me before all my relatives. You're merely the gardener's kid, she mocked with a sneer. My boy deserves someone from his own class, not some penniless outsider like you who doesn't fit into our circle. Yet she could never have foreseen the twist that unfolded several months afterward. Imani Thorne gently adjusted the pleats of her modest bridal dress. Her fingers shook as she gazed at her image in the modest mirror of the little chapel's changing area, where she'd been abandoned to prepare alone. The pale material felt gentle against her skin, though it wasn't luxurious satin or a fancy couture piece. It was a garment her mom had crafted with heartfelt effort and care. "This will do," she repeated to herself silently. Still inwardly, the stark contrast between her background and Elias Aworth's upscale life pressed heavily on her spirit. She couldn't shake the sneers from his kin that had stung her repeatedly in recent times. Her dad, Marcus, a sturdy fellow with palms roughened from decades tending the earth, glanced in from the entrance. His grin beamed with pride, yet a hint of concern flickered in his gaze. "You appear stunning, sweetheart," he remarked, stepping inside cautiously to avoid creasing his outfit. "A touch faded yet spotless." Imani offered a weak grin, appreciating his effort to comfort her. She realized he'd supported her as much as possible, despite his own lingering uncertainties. But how could she relax, knowing Elias's folks, positioned among the attendees beyond, outright rejected her? Her affection for Elias remained unshakable. However, the challenges they confronted grew more burdensome with each passing day. "Appreciate it, Dad," she responded, clasping his hand warmly. "Still, I keep dwelling on what's waiting just beyond those doors." Marcus exhaled deeply, drawing nearer and resting a palm on her arm. "What counts is your mutual devotion. The rest, you'll navigate it side by side." Imani dipped her head in agreement, even as she struggled to silence the harsh remarks flung by Randall and Vivian Amesworth, Elias's parents, on multiple occasions. "She's only the gardener's offspring," Vivian had declared, as if it sealed her fate. "He deserves a match, a true peer," the social circle had whispered. Yet Elias stayed resolute. He consistently stood by her. He invariably picked her. That loyalty bolstered her resolve, despite the taunts reverberating in her mind. The noise of the crowd quieting in the sanctuary signaled the ceremony's approach. Her pulse quickened, and she drew in a steadying breath to compose herself. Marcus, detecting her unease, gripped her fingers again. "Elias adores you. Focus on that for now." Imani beamed, her vision blurring with feeling, and affirmed with a nod. She recognized the truth in his words, but the burden of judgmental stares awaiting her beyond the threshold lingered inescapably. In the nave, Elias positioned himself by the podium, striving to conceal his inner turmoil. He anticipated the confrontation ahead. He grasped what his parents, particularly his dad Randall, intended. Randall had stated it bluntly in confidence. "Wed that woman," he'd warned in a low, measured tone. "And you're effectively exiled from us. Disinheritance awaits, Elias. No reversals." Those words still haunted him. Vivian, his mom, more tactful yet just as scheming, had attempted to steer him away with finesse. "Elias, imagine all your aspirations within reach," she'd cooed gently. "But choosing her means hardship. She's no match for you. She lacks insight into our realm. Avoid letting this error derail your path." Elias refused to yield, though. He cherished Imani and valued their bond as real and profound, far surpassing any shallow alliance his relatives might approve. He understood that wealth and influence couldn't substitute for his emotions toward her. Nonetheless, the familial strain pursued him relentlessly, like an unwelcome specter. As the chapel entrance swung wide and Imani emerged in the frame, every doubt evaporated. Elias beheld her, and the world narrowed to just that. She grounded him, fueling his readiness to rebel against it all. Imani proceeded deliberately along the aisle. The gleam of moisture in her eyes captured the swirl of sentiments they both endured. In the first seats, Randall eyed his offspring with icy detachment. Vivian, wearing a mask of acceptance, lifted her chin defiantly, though her contempt for the newcomer shone through to those nearby. Imani sensed her footfalls as leaden, but locking gazes with Elias soothed an inner storm. There stood her haven, her beloved. The connection was so vivid she could disregard the scrutinizing glances masked by courteous grins. Upon arriving at the platform, Elias clasped her palms in his, pressing them softly. "We'll face it as one, Imani," he murmured. She inclined her head, fighting back the sobs. She anticipated the trials ahead wouldn't prove simple. The minister commenced the proceedings. Yet prior to the pivotal exchange of promises, Randall rose abruptly from his place. Whispers rippled through the assembly. Elias's brow furrowed, aware Randall refused to let the moment slip away without delivering his parting shot. "Pardon me, Reverend," he interjected, breaking the solemn flow of the proceedings. "However, I believe it's essential that all those present grasp the significance of today's events." The bewildered minister halted, glancing toward Elias for guidance. Yet Randall pressed on without pause. Turning to the assembled crowd, he spoke in a resonant, commanding tone. "My son Elias is about to wed Imani, daughter of the gardener. I'm not intending any offense, but I must clarify the implications this union holds for our lineage." Murmurs intensified, with eyes turning to Imani, some offering compassion, others brimming with disapproval. "Elias has opted to disregard all we've sacrificed for him, the legacy we forged as a unit, in favor of uniting with someone evidently beneath his station." Imani sensed the breath drain from her body, yet before she could respond, Elias released her grasp and advanced. "Stop right there, Father," he declared, his tone resolute and laced with restrained fury. Randall appeared unmoved by the rebuke. He regarded his son with an icy detachment, familiar only to intimates. "Forgive me, my boy, but should you proceed, you'll forfeit your legacy, your standing in our household, it all. No reversals will be possible." A hush descended over the space. Attendees froze, anticipating Elias's retort. All recognized this instant as a pivotal turning point. Elias remained rooted before his father, the impact of those declarations bearing down like an avalanche. The chamber, once alive with hushed exchanges and sidelong looks, transformed into a profound emptiness, echoing solely with Randall's ultimatum. "You'll forfeit it all." Imani, at his side, watched with her pulse racing, her gaze misty with doubt, yearning for his glance to provide some comfort. But then, Elias was overwhelmed by a surge of fury and sorrow. Randall, still upright, scrutinized his offspring with a detached, strategic stare, underscoring his dominance in the gathering. What escaped him, though, was Elias's prior resolve, set well before this occasion. "Father," Elias uttered at last, his words subdued yet unwavering, "I recognize the importance this holds for you. I understand your visions for my path, the destiny you've long imposed. Yet this is my existence, and I'm selecting Imani out of profound affection. With her, true contentment awaits." Randall's brow furrowed, dismissing the sentiment as worthless. "Affection, you claim," he retorted, his inflection dripping with derision. "Elias, affection won't swell fortunes. It won't unlock opportunities. It won't secure the esteem required to expand our domain. Do you truly believe with her at your flank, you'll attain the prospects we've laid out?" Vivian, Elias's mother, stayed in her seat, observing the unfolding drama with a weary acceptance tinged by quiet grief. She realized reversal was impossible, and while she yearned for a choice that advanced the clan, the anguish it inflicted was undeniable. "Randall, enough," Vivian murmured, attempting to ease the tension. "This isn't the moment." But Randall ignored her. He was resolute in impressing upon his son the cost of defiance. Elias, jaw set, met his father's stare head-on. The quietude was overwhelming. Every soul in attendance suspended animation, sensing this wasn't mere discord, but a covert battle for Elias's essence. "I require neither your wealth nor your approval for fulfillment," Elias pressed on, his delivery gaining strength. "I've come to see that your provisions trap me in luxury's prison." He pivoted to Amani, clasping her fingers tenderly. "She grants me liberty. She's everything for my wholeness." Those declarations nearly brought tears to Amani's eyes. Elias had ever been her anchor. But now, confronting his progenitor on her behalf, she grasped the magnitude of his concession. The devotion he voiced wasn't shallow or momentary. It pledged an enduring partnership, a shared tomorrow, despite the odds. Randall balled his hands, visibly irked by his son's rebellion. From Elias's youth, he'd pictured a triumphant trajectory, replete with triumphs and influence, helming the enterprise, elevating the surname further. Yet that vision now disintegrated in his sight, undone by a lady he deemed bereft of contributions. "You're courting your greatest error," Randall hissed, eyeing Elias like an outsider. "She'll drag you to downfall, and when ruin strikes, seek no aid from us." The harshness prompted Amani to bow her head. Elias, however, stood unshaken. He gripped her hand more firmly, resolved against his father's assault on their hard-won bond. "In that case, no return will be necessary," Elias responded calmly. Though his chest thrummed with intensity, he continued, "If living with he choosing to forfeit all of that is a price I'm willing to pay." Randall shook his head in disbelief, stepping away and letting the microphone slip from his grasp, utterly unable to steer the moment any longer. The hall fell quiet once more, though now the hush stemmed not from the rift between parent and child, but from the sheer shock rippling through the attendees at the bold stand Elias had taken against his influential lineage. It was uncommon to witness defiance like this from someone of Elias's background. Eventually, Vivian rose from her place. She approached her son, her gaze brimming with conflicting feelings. She'd wished desperately that matters wouldn't escalate this far, yet she recognized her limits. Halting before him, she glanced fleetingly at Amani before fixing her eyes on Elias. "Elias," she murmured, her voice laced with restrained sorrow. "You understand the implications for your life ahead, right? You realize we can't proceed if you insist on this route." Elias met her stare, aware that her words flowed from a parent's deep affection, yet also from someone ensnared by rigid traditions and demands. "I do, mother," he answered more gently. "Yet this is the path I choose. Amani is my true family now." Vivian inclined her head in acknowledgement, offering no further protest. She understood his resolve was firm, and despite the heartache it caused, she resolved to cease her opposition. With a sorrowful glance toward her husband, who had already slumped back into his chair, bested in his bid for dominance, she made her way back. As Vivian reclaimed her seat, the proceedings resumed, though an undercurrent of awkward strain lingered in the air. Elias and Amani recited their pledges, fully cognizant that their shared journey would prove challenging. Still, clasping hands and gazing deeply into one another's eyes, they felt certain that their bond and the costs they'd borne outweighed any wealth or legacy. "I love you," Elias breathed while sliding the band onto her finger, his utterance carrying a vow for what lay ahead. Amani, tears glistening in her eyes, replied with a tender grin that reassured her amid all the turmoil. They belonged right there. The rite concluded to sparse claps and quiet whispers. Those present grasped that they'd observed far beyond a mere union. It was a revolt, a bold affirmation of devotion that scorned authority and riches alike. Hand in hand, Elias and Amani proceeded to the doorway, conscious that obstacles might litter their horizon, yet they triumphed in the crucial struggle, forging their fate, no matter the toll. Stepping beyond the church's entrance, they embraced the truth that unity would equip them for whatever came. Those initial months post-ceremony unfolded like an idyllic reverie for Elias and Amani. Though they'd abandoned so much, their mutual presence sufficed in the beginning. Their leased studio in a humble district exuded coziness, brimming with affection and optimism. Amani handled the furnishings modestly, infusing each space with her unique flair that lent vibrancy to every nook. Elias, for his part, labored relentlessly, pursuing fresh prospects to shape their existence free from his kin's looming influence. Regrettably, that tranquility proved short-lived. The initial warnings emerged as Elias observed opportunities that once flowed freely, now slamming shut before him. Firms he'd collaborated with previously ignored his outreach. Appointments that had been routine became unattainable. Initially, he dismissed it as happenstance, or the inevitable shift after severing family ties. Yet it dawned on him that darker forces were involved. One evening, following a fruitless discussion, Elias lingered solo at a cafe, studying his image in the glass. A sense of failure washed over him, the burden of challenging his father at last exacting its price. Suddenly, his cell buzzed. It was Trevor, a longtime acquaintance from the family circle who'd served at his dad's firm. Trevor's delivery carried gravity, tinged with sympathy. "Elias, I reached out to ensure you learned this directly from me, not through whispers," he stated quietly. "Your dad has reached out to all the contacts. He's ensured no ally or esteemed business will extend you employment. He's warned that backing you or Amani means crossing him." Elias's gut twisted. He recognized his father's clout, but hadn't foreseen such extremes. "Is this retaliation?" he inquired, though he intuitively grasped the truth. Trevor hesitated, as if weighing his response. "It's beyond mere spite. He aims to draw you home, but solely under his conditions. He claims reconciliation is possible if you abandon Amani and rejoin the fold." Elias gripped the tabletop, a surge of helpless fury building within. He perceived his father's view of it all as a tactical maneuver, yet another ploy for leverage. But this wasn't commerce. It was his existence, his union, his devotion to Amani. "That won't occur, Trevor. I refuse to abandon Amani," Elias declared, his tone resolute. Elias shook with barely restrained fury. Whatever he tried, it wouldn't make a difference. "I get that, but watch yourself, Elias. It's serious," Trevor warned, his voice turning somber. "He's hell-bent on ruining every shot you get, and I suspect this is only the start." Elias ended the call, as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. Confronting his dad was bound to bring fallout, but he hadn't anticipated it hitting this hard. Elias, the sort who always carved his own path, now saw himself ensnared in a tangle beyond his grasp. He understood his father could wipe out his standing in the corporate realm, and that threat was already sabotaging his ability to provide for his family. That evening, when he got back, Amani greeted him like usual, her face lit with a gentle, worried smile. Yet tonight, even her warmth couldn't chase away Elias's gloom. He dropped onto the couch in silence, his posture sagging, eyes distant. "What's wrong, Elias?" Amani murmured, settling next to him. He met her gaze, and after ages words escaped him entirely. She could sense the strain, the finances tightening, prospects fading away. Admitting it stemmed from his father's scheme only deepened his powerlessness. "Dad's ensured no one with ties to him will hire me," he admitted at last, tone lifeless. Amani stared quietly, processing the implications. She was aware Randall could stoop to extremes, yet wrapping her head around such ruthlessness toward his own child was tough. "What does he expect?" she ventured, suspecting the reply. "He demands I ditch you, return and follow his script, like nothing's changed." Elias exhaled sharply, laced with bitterness. "He promises to restore it all if I walk away, that I could reclaim the future he envisioned." A twist gripped Amani's gut. This wasn't the initial occasion she'd questioned if their bond was costing Elias dearly. He'd sacrificed it all for her sake, and silently, she'd worried the load might one day overwhelm him. But locking eyes, she spotted that unyielding resolve in him, the very spark that had captured her heart initially. "Elias, I won't make you keep giving up so much on my account," she whispered faintly. He stared, stunned she'd entertained the notion. Grasping her hand with resolve, as though his father's threats might steel her, he replied, "This isn't you demanding anything. It's my decision. Yours alone. I'd pick you over and over 1,000 times." His words broke, yet his stare held steady. "He won't break me. I'm not abandoning you, Amani." Tears traced Amani's face, born not of sorrow, but the depth of love and resolve Elias revealed right then. Still, they grasped the road ahead was foggy, with Randall's influence looming relentlessly. The ensuing weeks proved tougher still. Funds dwindled fast, and each slammed door amplified Elias's frustration. He hunted jobs relentlessly, but whispers had circulated. The defiant heir, Elias, was toxic. Even spots beyond his family's reach viewed his name as a red flag. Amani pitched in as best she could, though her talents and network fell short of steadying the ship. One afternoon, as Elias hunched over scant job leads in their modest kitchen, the phone buzzed once more. Not Trevor this round. It was Randall. "This suffering's unnecessary, Elias," his father intoned, tone polished yet laced with that icy command he'd long held. "We can reset to normalcy. Just choose wisely." Elias clutched the receiver, fury surging, though he fought for composure. "Your idea of wise, Dad, not mine. My heart's with Amani. I'm staying." Randall hesitated, as if weighing his next move. "Fine. Keep playing. Let's see your endurance without a lifeline. When you're desperate, you'll reach out." Elias cut the line, hit harder than before. His father was unrelenting, but so was he. The pressure, however, was mounting unbearably. Amani entered then, catching the strain etched on his features. "That was him, right?" she queried, blending concern with quiet defeat. He nodded, speechless. Rising, he pulled her into a fierce embrace. She leaned against him, and in that instant, they both knew more than their romance hung in the balance. It was their fight against a merciless force aiming to drive them apart. Yet as Elias ran his fingers softly through Amani's hair, a truth dawned on him. His father might strip away possessions, but not the one irreplaceable element. Days wore on, and the challenges only intensified for Elias and Amani. Finances were tighter than they'd ever been, and job prospects for Elias were disappearing at a breakneck speed. Yet amid the turmoil, a piece of news landed that would transform their world completely. One afternoon, as Elias scoured the streets for work, Imani perched in their cramped apartment bathroom, clutching a pregnancy test. Her pulse raced wildly. The outcome was unmistakable. She was expecting. A whirlwind of emotions churned within her, pure delight at the thought of motherhood clashing with dread over how it'd complicate their already tough situation. When Elias trudged back, drained and ashen from yet another fruitless search, he spotted Amani on the couch, eyes brimming with tears, though these weren't born of despair. Perplexed and anxious, Elias hurried over and dropped to his knees before her. "What is it, love?" he inquired gently. Imani clasped his hands and offered a watery grin. I'm pregnant, Elias. Time froze for Elias in that instant. His thoughts scrambled to absorb the revelation. A baby on the way. Even with the turmoil engulfing them, this revelation sparked a glow he hadn't known in ages. Gradually, a grin broke across his features, and moisture welled in his eyes. For real, he whispered, voice cracking with feeling. We're about to become parents. Imani dipped her head in affirmation. Right then, Elias pulled her into a fierce embrace, both allowing happy tears to stream unchecked. For the first time in ages, a spark of optimism pierced the gloom. This unborn child, whom they hadn't even encountered, already fueled their resolve to push forward. But practicality crept back in quickly. The infant's arrival would ramp up their demands, and they realized they needed to hustle and make ends meet pronto. That's when Imani recalled a cherished skill she'd always loved, crafting unique cakes and sweets. She'd picked up baking as a kid, helping her mom in their humble kitchen. It brought her joy and had wowed plenty of folks who'd sampled her creations. In that flash, she figured this talent might just be their lifeline. Elias, she ventured one evening over a simple meal. I've got an idea. I could try selling cakes. It might not be a fortune, but posting them online could bring in some cash. He regarded her attentively. He was well aware of Imani's baking prowess, but turning it into a business hadn't crossed his mind. You reckon? He responded, though he was already envisioning its promise. I could manage the drop-offs, and we could set up a profile to showcase them. Imani beamed, thrilled by his support. That evening, they burned the midnight oil sketching out a strategy. Leveraging his rudimentary tech skills, Elias whipped up a basic social media spot to display shots of the treats Imani started whipping up. Meanwhile, she tinkered with fresh flavors and designs, aiming to deliver something standout. The initial weeks dragged with modest success. They offloaded a few orders sporadically, handing them to nearby buyers who'd stumbled on their page. Elias zipped around on his bike for transport since a vehicle was out of reach. It wasn't a windfall at the outset, but each trip back brought him grinning ear to ear. Folks are raving about your bakes, he'd exclaim with gusto. One customer swore these were the finest they'd ever had. Imani, worn out from her pregnancy and endless kitchen stints, sensed they were carving a path to stability at last. Each sale boosted her assurance. Their tiny kitchen had morphed into an impromptu bake shop, dusted with flour and sugar, the fragrance of fresh pastries wafting through the space. One afternoon, as Elias dropped off an order to a steady patron, a sharply dressed guy lingering outside a towering office, he drew notice. The fellow, eyeing the cake box Elias carried with keen curiosity, stepped closer. Those treats yours? He queried with a warm grin. Nah, my wife's handiwork, Elias answered amiably. I just ferry them out. The man inclined his head, scrutinizing the package. I manage for a coffee chain, he explained, offering his name as David, overseer at a prominent area food outfit. We're hunting for fresh options to feature in our spots. Yours look top-notch. Care to let us taste test at our flagship? If they impress, we might arrange steady supplies from you. Elias stood stunned briefly. This was genuine luck. After their string of setbacks, might this prove the breakthrough they'd craved? Absolutely, he managed at last, buzzed with energy. I'll swing by a larger batch next week. That afternoon, racing home, Elias struggled to hold back his thrill. Imani, you won't believe what just went down. Ned, he exclaimed, bursting through the door of their apartment. The manager of a coffee shop chain is eager to try your pastries. This might turn into something massive. Imani stared at him in shock, her eyes widening. For real? She questioned as though it sounded too good to be true. Elias confirmed with a nod, pulling her into a warm embrace. We're making this happen, Imani. It could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. That evening, as Elias and Imani cuddled on their modest shared bed, a wave of positivity washed over them stronger than it had in ages. They understood the path ahead remained tough, yet now a glimmer of possibility ignited where none had existed. And most importantly, they were tackling it as a team. The next week, Imani whipped up her finest treats, while Elias made sure the presentation was flawless. They delivered everything to the chain's flagship location, where David, the manager, was struck by both the exceptional flavors and the inspiring backstory. Just a few days after, the life-altering phone call arrived. "Your desserts are a hit," David declared. "We're ready to sign a deal for regular weekly supplies from you." Elias and Imani were stunned. After endless hardships and tough choices, this marked their first genuine chance to thrive. They were finally crafting a future all their own, one that even Randall couldn't strip away. As Imani gently rubbed her increasingly rounded belly, with Elias gazing at her in adoration and joy, they realized that amid every obstacle, they'd triumphed in the biggest fight, committing to each other and confronting whatever came their way. And with visions of a brighter tomorrow for their family, the period after sealing the deal with the coffee chain transformed Elias and Imani's world. Gradually, demand surged, evolving their humble side gig into a thriving enterprise. Imani, her pregnancy bump growing more obvious, devoted endless hours to innovating flavors and perfecting each batch. Elias, ever dependable, oversaw shipments, organized operations, and started handling the bookkeeping and deals, spurred by the rising buzz around their sweets. Yet, prosperity brought its share of hurdles. The nonstop labor was wearing Imani down, and her late-stage pregnancy left her utterly drained. One afternoon, as the days wore on, while she hunched over the workspace icing a fresh order, a sudden stab in her lower back halted her cold. She inhaled deeply, attempting to steady herself, but the ache persisted. Elias entered right then, arms loaded with a hefty crate of ingredients, and upon spotting her pained look, he let it all crash down. "Everything all right?" he inquired, hurrying to her side. Imani forced a grin to ease his mind, though the hurt made it impossible to fake. "It's probably just the little one kicking up a storm today," she managed. Despite the obvious strain, Elias eyed her worriedly. He recognized her remarkable resilience, but he also saw how desperately her body craved a break. Dropping to his knees next to her, he clasped her hand softly. "Imani, it's time you took it easy. You've pushed yourself way too much," he urged, his voice gentle yet insistent. She gave a slight shake of her head. "We've got all these commitments, Elias. We can't afford to slack off now. This is what's keeping us afloat." Elias traced her cheek, his expression a blend of affection and anxiety. "I get it, but you and the baby come first, no matter how delicious the treats are. I'll handle the rest today. Promise me you'll unwind." At last, Imani agreed, acknowledging she had to heed her body's warnings. Elias led her to the couch, settling her in snugly. Then he headed back to the kitchen, resolved to wrap up the batch solo. That evening, with Imani recharging, Elias pored over their budget and pending requests. The venture was expanding beyond their wildest expectations, which thrilled them, but it also demanded better ways to juggle the demands. Bringing on assistants made perfect sense, though their finances were still tight from recent setbacks, leaving little room for big spends. Come morning, over their shared meal, Imani sipped her tea and met Elias's eyes, deep in reflection. "Something's on my mind," she began. "What if we scout for a little shop space?" "A shop," he echoed, glancing up from his reading. "Isn't that jumping the gun a tad?" Imani's face lit up with excitement. "Not if we're scaling like this. It won't be long before we outgrow the apartment. And with our own spot, we could bring in help for the baking. Once the baby's born, we won't manage from home alone." Elias pondered silently for a beat. Owning a storefront had long been a fantasy, but the chaos of late had narrowed his focus to mere endurance. Still, catching the spark in Imani's voice, he sensed that vision was nearer than ever. "You're spot on," He agreed at last, grinning broadly. Time to hunt for a spot. It'll be tough, but once we nail the perfect one, we can move ahead. Amani mirrored his grin, a wave of deep relief washing over her. The journey up to that point had been rough, yet suddenly a fresh outlook brimming with opportunities unfolded before them. The ensuing weeks buzzed with anticipation and anxiety. Elias managed shipments and kept eyeing out promising sites, while Amani, heavy with her late-term pregnancy, oversaw orders from their house, now and then getting a hand from a kind neighbor stepping in to help. At long last, after endless days of hunting, they stumbled upon a cozy little shopfront in the city center, snug beside a bustling coffee spot. It was unpretentious, yet equipped with all the essentials: a roomy prep area, space for serving folks, and a front window primed to draw in folks strolling by. The lease price was reasonable, and a bit of hard work would surely shape it into a gem. "This one's it," Amani declared with bubbling enthusiasm. Wandering through the rooms, her mind already sketching out the decor and envisioning it stocked with just-baked treats. "I can picture everything, Elias. It'll feel like our second home." Elias observed her, a blend of admiration and affection swelling in his chest. After all the trials they'd endured, they were crafting their very own venture, something unbreakable by outside forces. "We'll pull it off," Elias vowed, clasping her hand. "This marks our big leap forward." Once the agreement was sealed and the keys secured, the upgrades kicked off. Progress crawled along since they juggled ongoing orders alongside fitting out the venue for launch. Still, day by day, the site evolved, mirroring the shifts in their world. One evening, as they brushed paint across the fresh store's walls, Amani halted, her palm resting on her belly. "Seems the little one's thrilled as well," she remarked, beaming. "He's kicking up a storm right now." Elias hurried over, laying his hand gently on Amani's abdomen to sense the tiny flutters. "He'll turn out a fantastic pastry chef. I'd bet on it," he teased, his gaze brimming with tenderness. Amani chuckled, but a brief twinge cut her mirth short. Elias eyed her with concern. "You okay?" She dipped her head, even as discomfort showed plainly. "Probably just him getting comfy, but let's pack up and relax at home." Elias wasted no time. He understood the recent stretch had drained them both, hitting Amani hardest. They set aside the supplies and headed back, fully aware that amid the workload, her well-being and the baby's came first. Their enterprise was gaining momentum, the blueprint advancing steadily, and their tomorrow starting to solidify. Each day brought hurdles, but Amani and Elias grew nearer to grasping their goals. The path hadn't been smooth, yet sharing it forged their strength, rendering them unstoppable. Though echoes of old troubles lingered, the thriving they were forging through sheer grit stood as powerful proof that dedication and affection could surmount the tallest walls. Elias and Amani poured endless energy into polishing the final touches on their budding store. Launch date loomed near, and while fatigue from endless shifts gnawed at them, a thrill laced with jitters hung in the atmosphere. Their vision of an independent outfit teetered on the brink of truth. Yet the strain to nail a flawless debut pressed hard, amplified by the impending birth. One dawn, as Amani wrapped up arranging the showcase shelves in the revamped area, a fierce ache gripped her midsection. Initially, she dismissed it as routine, expecting twinges. But this surge hit harder, and dread swept through her. She froze, drawing steady breaths and bracing against the surface, hoping the spasm would ease. Elias, just then stepping inside from checking documents outdoors, caught sight of her hunched-over features clenched in distress. "Amani," he queried anxiously, rushing close. "What is it?" She forced a grin to ease his mind, but agony betrayed the act. I believe the baby's set to arrive," she murmured, her tone shaky. Elias surged with equal parts dread and elation. He'd sensed the hour drawing close, but not this abruptly. "Hospital now?" he urged, snatching the keys and aiding her to her feet with care. The drive blurred in a haze of stress and eagerness. Amani focused on measured inhales to steady herself, as Elias gripped the steering wheel with one fist while squeezing her fingers with the other. He stole frequent peeks her way, aiming to confirm her steadiness, despite the gnawing worry in his gut leaving him powerless. At the medical center, the team ushered them in promptly, whisking Amani to labor and delivery. Elias, nerves frayed, remained glued to her throughout. The stretch that came next dragged on wearily. Elias had never experienced a powerful mix of terror and deep feeling washed over him. Clutching Amani's hand tightly, Elias caught the strain and agony etched across her features. Yet he also witnessed the remarkable resilience she showed right then. His respect for his spouse deepened moment by moment. At last, following what felt like an eternity of waiting, an infant's wail shattered the heavy quiet in the delivery room. Elias and Amani exchanged glances, their eyes brimming with joyful tears and a profound sense of ease. The physician raised the newborn, settling her gently onto Amani's bosom, and suddenly the space overflowed with a warmth absent for so long. "She's a girl," Elias murmured, his words cracking under the weight of feeling. Amani, weary yet glowing, gazed at her little one with pure affection. She caressed the newborn's delicate flesh, murmuring endearments while tears streamed down her face. Elias drew closer, wrapping his arms around them, and in that instant, everything beyond their circle faded away. They formed a complete family now. Later that day, as Amani dozed with the baby cradled against her, Elias stepped out for a breath of fresh air. Even amid the elation bubbling inside, he recognized that responsibilities loomed. The bakery neared its big debut, though a handful of final touches remained. Gazing through the hospital pane, his mind wandered to his dad, to all the past they'd abandoned, and how fate had guided them here. The clashes with relatives, the slammed opportunities, the relentless hardships. They'd all proven worthwhile for this chapter. Still, his father's presence lingered faintly in the background. Elias was aware that Randall had pulled every trick to sabotage their happiness. Yet what Randall couldn't predict was the unbreakable bond he shared with Amani, far surpassing any sway or authority his parent might exert. But uncertainty persisted. Had he really escaped his family's grip? Days following the arrival of their child, whom they called Zuri, beautiful in Swahili, honoring their roots, the bakery's launch day dawned at last. Amani, mending slowly, oversaw the finishing touches remotely, as Elias teamed up with a few trusted pals to set the scene. Colorful balloons floated, fresh blooms adorned the space, and a straightforward yet heartfelt banner hung by the door, Zuri's specialty desserts. The debut proved triumphant. Local folks, loyal tasters of her previous bakes, plus intrigued newcomers, wandered into the cozy spot, lured by the mouthwatering scents and cozy vibe. Elias and Amani could scarcely trust their eyes. After endless months of toil, perseverance, and hurdles, their vision had materialized. Yet amid the celebrations and flurry of activity, Elias spotted a known silhouette slipping through the crowd. His dad, Randall, had shown up. A tightness gripped Elias's gut. He had no clue what to anticipate. Months had passed without a word between them, and their prior exchange had ended bitterly. Randall, clad in his flawless attire, made his way deliberately to the register, facing Elias's stern expression. "Elias," Randall uttered, his tone carrying less command than before. "I came to check on your progress." Elias eyed him warily, questioning whether this visit stemmed from genuine care or yet another ploy to underscore his supposed shortcomings. "We're doing well, Dad," Elias responded steadily, despite the turmoil swirling within. "Your blessing isn't required." Randall studied him briefly, and for the first time, Elias detected an unfamiliar glint in those eyes. Fatigue. The once indomitable patriarch appeared aged, more exposed. "That's not why I'm here," Randall admitted, drawing in a steadying breath. "I've reflected a lot. Perhaps I misjudged. I never imagined you'd push this ahead." Elias stood speechless, his father's admission catching him off guard. He'd battled for ages to prove his independence, free from the family wealth. Now staring across, his dad appeared ready to concede that point. "Hear me out, Elias," Randall pressed on. "I remain convinced this route wasn't ideal for you." But his delivery eased, a novelty to Elias's ears. "Still, I have to respect your accomplishments. I'm here to offer my best wishes, all things considered." Stunned, Elias dipped his head in acknowledgement. "Appreciate it, Dad," he managed, at a loss for more. Randall lingered briefly, as though words teetered on his tongue, but ultimately pivoted and exited the premises without a backward glance. Elias tracked his departure, a blend of release and bewilderment settling in. It might not signal the close of their tensions, yet for once, a faint spark of mending flickered. Back at Amani's side, she beamed up at him. Zuri nestled securely. "So what went down?" she queried, reading his expression. "Dad stopped by." "To wish us well," Elias shared, hardly believing it himself. Amani regarded him with astonishment, but held her peace. Instead, she reached out, and as he scooped up their tiny girl, he realized that no matter the challenges ahead, nothing could ever drive them apart after that. They had forged a genuine bond, one that belonged solely to them. Soft morning light filtered through the windows of the cozy bakery, casting a warm glow over the glass shelves, brimming with tempting treats that turned Zur's specialty desserts into a local favorite. It felt like any ordinary day. Yet for Elias and Amani, each moment in this place served as a testament to their shared triumphs, defying every challenge they'd faced. Little Zuri, now a few months old, rested in an improvised bassinet behind the counter, letting out soft chuckles while toying with her tiny stuffed animal. Amani, her face radiating affection and calm, meticulously adorned a personalized cake in the back for one of their loyal patrons. Up front, Elias greeted patrons with a grin that went beyond mere professional courtesy. It shone with a tranquility he hadn't known in years. After enduring his father's ultimatums and those bleak stretches of doubt, when success seemed impossible, they'd arrived at this serene chapter. They caught each other's gaze and shared a knowing smile, aware that the true victory lay not in the bakery's prosperity, but in crafting a lasting legacy no one could dismantle. A household, a sanctuary, and a horizon brimming with hope. As the afternoon rush tapered off, Amani settled beside Elias, gently caressing Zuri's delicate fingers while the baby dozed soundly. "Remember those early days?" she inquired, a fond reminiscence lighting her features. "It all felt so precarious back then, and now, just see us here." Elias dipped his head in agreement, those anxious times vivid in his mind. Endless questions, restless evenings spent fretting over whether they'd pull through. Yet he also recalled the modest breakthroughs, the instances where progress edged them onward amid relentless setbacks. "It demanded effort, but it paid off," Elias responded, clasping Amani's hand. "Each hardship, every barrier. It led us right to this." Amani met his eyes, spotting the unyielding resolve and passion that had first captured her heart. Even with the costs of rebelling against his kin, he'd never second-guessed his path. He'd embraced their connection, and that devotion had carried them through the bleakest hours. "Occasionally, I wonder about the alternate path," Amani mused, a hint of contemplation softening her tone. "What if we'd yielded? If you'd followed your father's demands? If the strain had driven a wedge between us?" Elias gave a subtle shake of his head. "Dwelling on hypotheticals isn't for us. All our trials shape this reality, And I wouldn't trade a bit of it. Take Zuri, he added, gesturing toward their infant. She proves every choice was spot on. The quiet that ensued carried a profound harmony, a mutual comprehension born of their journey. They recognized the road hadn't been smooth, but it was authentically theirs, selected in unison. Then, with a gentle chime, the door swung open, drawing their attention to Randall, Elias's father, stepping inside at a measured pace. The old undercurrent of strain his arrival once sparked had vanished. His expression revealed an inner shift. He no longer embodied the domineering figure who'd sought to dictate his son's fate. Randall drew nearer to the counter, surveying the space before his gaze lingered on the slumbering Zuri. "What a lovely girl," he murmured, shattering the hush. "She favors her mom." Elias shared a fleeting look with Amani, then affirmed with a nod. He sensed the depth in his father's remark. It went beyond flattery, marking an unforeseen acknowledgement. "Appreciate it, Dad," Elias said, moving closer. Randall inhaled deeply, as though releasing a long-buried burden. At last, the admission surfaced. "I erred, Elias. I was mistaken on countless fronts," he confessed, his voice laced with unaccustomed fragility. "I believed my vision was right for you, but my ego clouded everything. Witnessing your life here, the family, this venture, it hits me that wealth and influence don't top the list." A burden eased from Elias's heart. He'd longed for such sentiments. While mending ties wouldn't happen overnight, this was progress, a move toward healing. "My only wish was joy with Amani and our child," Elias stated evenly, conviction underscoring his words. "I hoped you'd recognize that, grasp it fully." Randall inclined his head deliberately, regarding his son with remorse mingled with admiration. "I get it at last, and I'm sorry for the bind I created. I'm not seeking favors, only to say I'm impressed by your accomplishments." Moisture gathered in Elias's eyes, but he held steady, composing himself. He reached out to his father, who paused briefly before grasping it. That modest act, unassuming as it was, signaled the start of fresh possibilities. Imani, observing the moment, experienced a serenity she had never known. She understood that Elias had shouldered his father's rejection for years, and witnessing that modest reconciliation offered vital resolution for them both. Once Randall departed, the store returned to quiet. Yet now it carried an air of optimism. A fresh start emerged, not just for Elias and Amani, but also for his ties to the family he'd abandoned. "Do you believe it'll be different going forward?" Imi inquired, gently swaying Zuri in her embrace. Elias gazed at her, pausing thoughtfully. "I'm not sure," he admitted candidly, "but what's key is that we're solid, and that stays constant. The rest will unfold in due course." Imani grinned, resting her head against Elias's shoulder, while they admired the evening sky via the window. They'd begun from scratch, enduring unimaginable hardships, yet they'd prevailed, not chasing riches or acclaim, but through their shared devotion and faith. And right then, cradling their child amid their modest venture, they realized genuine achievement lay not in possessions, but in the bond they'd forged. A bond that, despite every obstacle, thrived, demonstrating how affection and determination can overcome the toughest trials. The road ahead remained unpredictable, but Elias and Amani were certain that whatever arose, they'd advance side by side, and that stood as their ultimate triumph. Enjoyed the tale, and from which town are you tuning in? Share in the comments below. If the story resonated, show your support with a super thanks to help me deliver more narratives like this. Thanks a ton for your kind backing. Can't wait to read your thoughts on it. Check out the 2 fresh life tales on screen that I strongly suggest. My channel has tons more. Hit subscribe if you haven't. catch you in the upcoming life story with warmth and admiration.